Hello, I'm Ollie, and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, horror, I've got a review for you of Anybody Home by Michael J Seidlinger. So this is a 2022 release, came out in August of this year. I was approached by the publicist before it came out to see if I'd be interested in taking a copy in for a review, and I said yes. And I've now finished it. So the book took a bit longer than expected to get to me from the US, and then it took me a bit longer to read it than expected. So certainly missed that August date for the review, but thought I'd talk to you about it today anyway because it's definitely an interesting book, and it's a book there was quite a lot of buzz about around the time of its release, and I can see why, because what it does, and its slightly different take on the horror genre, I think is genuinely quite interesting, albeit I found the book overall wasn't terribly successful. So let me tell you what it's about. So it's a home invasion story. So about a gang of criminals invading a house, and it's very similar in a lot of ways to, in terms of it, I suppose its tone, and the kind of shock value that it's trying to wring out of its story, to the two films, both of which are called Funny Games, by Michael Haneke. So one I think came out. So there's I think a Dutch version that came out in the 90s, and then there was a Hollywood remake that he also made that came out in the 2000s. And if you've seen either of those films, they are quite grueling and horrific stories of of a home invasion that is incredibly horrible. And that there's definitely similar themes explored in this. And the essential setup is the same. So there's a family in the house. The house gets invaded by this group of people, and horrific things ensue. What is interesting about this book is the way it's told. So it's told from the perspective of someone who's involved in this home invasion, but speaking to you in the second person as somebody who's another part of that invading party. So the author is trying to make the reader feel complicit in what is happening, and it certainly makes for an absorbing read. So I read this, so it's like 250 odd pages. I read it quite easily in a day. It's really gripping. You want to know what's going to happen, and it does manage to pull you in. It certainly pulled me in, but I didn't find it as effective as I would have expected to. I think home invasion is kind of a commonly held fear nowadays, and something that we can imagine happening. And I think even where there isn't violence involved, the idea of people invading your home, invading your personal space, is an unsettling one. And in this book, there's definitely violence involved, but it wasn't as effective as I would have expected it to be, as I say. And I think the reason for that is a lot to do with the style. So it feels very stylized. It's deliberately written in this unusual way, which at first is quite impactful. So at first I thought, this is quite interesting, and a lot of the book is about the preparation for the home invasion. So kind of getting to know the routines of the family, even getting to know members of the family through social media and things like that, and that is quite chilling. The idea of people out there, maybe an interaction you have in the street which feels completely normal and everyday, actually being the precursor to someone invading your home. So that was effective and interesting. But because of the remoteness of the style, because it's this one character speaking to you as another character, that for me got between me and the story. And the other thing that Michael Seidlinger does in this, which again I found distanced me from the horror of what was going on, is none of the characters are named. So the characters are all named either invader and then a number, or victim and then a number. And what that means is, I found it quite difficult to remember who was who, but also I found it, I've formed no bonds, no emotional bonds with any of the characters, because I'd never felt like I knew that much about them. And I think that's deliberate. I think he is deliberately presenting this kind of two faceless groups of people, because they could be anybody. And I guess that's part of the point. You know, the victims could be any of us, and the invaders could be anybody, could be somebody, you know, we see on the street. So I think that was a deliberate choice on the part of the writer. But for me personally, it definitely got between me and the story and the impact of the story. So I found this book, I think, much less chilling and effective and disturbing than it might have been. It didn't sort of disturb me at all. There's certainly bits that make you think, as I've said, and bits that are chilling. But the impact of the kind of violence and assaults in this book was definitely diminished by the fact that I had no real connection with the characters. So it's an interesting book. I can see why there was a fair amount of buzz about it when it came out. I think the concept is really interesting, and I would be interested to try something else by the author. He's written quite a few other things, and there's definitely something there in terms of him experimenting with different ways of portraying horror and describing horror. But for me, this one missed the mark. I just felt like I could kind of see what he was trying to do with it, but it just didn't really work for me. And as a result, I enjoyed or got less out of the book than I think I would have done otherwise. I think the same story told in a much more traditional way could have been more impactful. For me, as I say, the stylised writing just got in the way of everything. So yeah, not a fantastic read for me, but definitely an interesting one. And if you like the sound of it, then do check it out. If you think that's something could work for you, there's definitely a lot of talent on display here. It's just, as I say, it just didn't come together into a satisfying whole. So time for a random book from the shelves, something that is also quite a kind of stylised type of horror novel, but completely different from Anybody Home. That is Meddling Kids by Edgar Cantero, which is a quite entertaining kind of spin on Scooby-Doo. So the idea being that years later the gang get back together again and investigate strange goings on in their town. So it was quite an entertaining read. So I hope you found that interesting. Let me know if you've read Anybody Home and what you thought of it. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.